Danny McBride has made a career out of playing the same type of character, one that's loud, obnoxious, and just wants to get their way. Walton Goggins is in a similar position, usually being typecast into eccentric characters akin to some of Nicolas Cage's more unorthodox work. Both these actors do pull off these archetypes extremely well, however. McBride might not have the same acting chops as Walton Goggins, but he can take a one-note comedic character and actually convey some emotional substance, while Goggins truly embraces the personality of his characters and brings them to life with sheer energy and intelligence.
This is my house, motherfucker. It's a mid-century sea ranch.
Coming off their previous efforts with Eastbound and Down, Danny McBride and Jody Hill once again team up for a tonally similar project with Vice Principals. On paper, it doesn't sound like much. McBride and Goggins play two disgruntled vice principals who try to seize the opportunity to take charge of North Jackson High School, only to be faced with the obstacle of trying to dethrone the new principal, played by Kimberly Hebert Gregory.
Now, if I find them out of that office again, you might find yourself out of this office. And what the hell are you grinning about? Take your narrow ass back in that office!
What starts as a comedic feud for a solitary position turns into an evolving drama that explores the tragedies of its three central characters. I was taken back by what Jody Hill and Danny McBride are trying to do with this series. For a comedy on HBO, you'd expect it to have some meat on the bone, such as Silicon Valley and Veep, but given how flat many of Hill and McBride's projects are to me, I was initially reserved until the show began to hook me, and by the end of the second episode, it set the boundary on which it crossed with a surprisingly profound effect. Vice Principals is mean-spirited in its humour, typically revolving around humiliation or disparity between its characters, but it genuinely works when the show becomes less caricature and more mature. McBride's Neil Gamby and Goggins' Lee Russell are both horrible people on the outside. Gamby is rude and bad-tempered, whereas Russell's charm masks the psychopath beneath him. Yet as the show develops, their individual frustrations and aspirations begin to take shape and mould them into more complex characters. Gamby is constantly trying to impress his daughter he feels is becoming alienated from him, whereas Russell lacks power and respect outside the walls of the school. As these personal tragedies begin to carry the story, Kimberly Gregory's Belinda Brown exposes the show's emphasis on fragility. She can be a very menacing presence at times, but Gamby and Russell's attempts to dethrone her begin to strain her already fractured life. The pilot sets up what is initially a quirky situation, but the events that follow are dramatically handled. The three leads all give tremendously fitting performances, as I actually felt sympathetic of each character's struggles, despite how selfish they may appear. Comedies with morally oblivious characters such as It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia succeed on the commitment to the darkness of their characters, but Vice Principals approaches its comedy like a serial drama. Comedy acts as a foundation for the show, but it never conflicts with the emotional core of its story. But that's not to say its execution isn't flawed. The show can be best described as emotional for sure, but also deeply inconsistent. Some episodes are wonderfully effective both comedically and poignantly and advance the narrative in exciting ways, while others are stagnant and seem to lose focus entirely. The third episode, for example, focuses exclusively on Gamby and his relationship with the innocent but also conflicted Amanda Snodgrass. It's an insightful episode that enlightens the surprising depth that McBride gives to Gamby, yet the problem is that within the timeline of 9 episodes, it felt far too premature to invest in a character study when the central conflict was still developing and had just reached a dramatic peak. There are many times when the plot slows down to fill up a season, and some moments felt meaningless to the point it's comparable to The Walking Dead's meandering storyline. This is a show that only has 2 seasons that have already completed filming. An endgame is in sight, and it hits enough narrative beats to sustain my interest. There are moments of brilliance scattered throughout that allude to a much richer story embedded within a very simple but flawed execution. Heading into its second and final season, I can only hope, given its shocking first season conclusion, that the show finally finds its footing. Vice Principals is like a car with a flat tire. Everything is functioning rather well, but its minor hiccups need to be addressed immediately to avoid coming to an abrupt and frustrating halt.